WiSP Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello, and thank you for downloading the WiSP Sports Desk here on WiSP Sports. This is our weekly roundup of the news from around the world of women's sports. And this is Season 2, Episode 6. And bringing you the top stories this week, we have Nancy Gillen, of course, alongside me, Chris Stafford. Nancy is a senior reporter at Inside the Games. So, Nancy, really it's all about coronavirus, isn't it? That's leading the news this week. Yeah,
it's kind of been ongoing since January, really, and a lot of sporting events have been cancelled or postponed. And now, I suppose one of the issues is a lot of teams and athletes can't compete in competitions around the world, either because they've been in China and are quarantined, or because maybe the other country isn't really letting like Chinese athletes into the country in case the virus is spread. So one of the affected teams is the Chinese team in the women's handball qualifications for the Olympics. And we've talked about in previous weeks how it's kind of starting to affect the Olympics a lot more, and whether it's going to have any effect on the games in Tokyo this summer. And we are starting to see athletes unable to take part in qualifying competitions. And like in this story, the Chinese women's team can't take place in the handball qualifications. So they're essentially giving up their place at the Olympics. So that's already had a really direct impact on the games this summer. So Thailand are going to replace them instead. So my colleague who wrote the story said it was, he was kind of saying that Thailand lost in the event to qualify for this event. They lost every single game and finished bottom of the table. So it's like a massive stroke of luck for them. I think that they've got another chance.
Yeah, and I think that's the devastating part about the timing of this virus, isn't it? Because it will have that effect on qualifications for Tokyo, and we could see a very different scenario, couldn't we? Having teams like Thailand being able to step up. I mean, this is just an example, and there's a long time before Tokyo, I know, but it could really have devastating impact for some teams. Yeah,
I think China are normally quite a big powerhouse at the Olympics as well. They're normally in the top 5 for medals at least. And yeah, we could probably see them maybe sink down quite a bit, and not because they don't have the sporting ability, but it is literally because their athletes can't actually participate in qualifying. So yeah, we don't know how long this is going to go on for, but at the moment, teams are already being affected by it.
Yeah, and also hockey. I know there's a story one of your colleagues covered on Inside the Games about the Indians and their planned hockey tour of China.
Yeah, so they had planned to, I think, go to China for about a week in March, and this again wasn't qualifying, but it was preparation for Tokyo. So obviously they're unable to go to that, and again it's I doubt it will affect them that much, and they could probably just go somewhere else and play against other teams and so on. But it is kind of a last minute change to their Tokyo preparation. So again, it's another team that aren't even they're not even Chinese. It's in India. They're the Indian women's hockey team, so they're already being affected by it as well.
And they, I saw that they beat the US in the qualifiers.
Yeah, yeah. I think they pipped the US to the Olympics. So yeah.
All right. Well, we'll watch that unfold, of course, as it does, because we're hearing more stories and more outbreaks, more people affected by the coronavirus. I mean, every day, and in different parts of the world too. So it's not going to go away anytime soon, is it? And I think the rate of progress has slowed down, but not the casualties.
Yeah, I think it seems like it's not hit its peak yet, which I think is probably the concern, because I think once it's hit its peak and it's started to, it's more controlled, and I think governments and countries can deal with it better, then it'd be okay. And I think we know what we're dealing with. But at the moment, it's not kind of reached maximum crisis time. And I feel, it's like 6 months even to the Olympics. So I think everyone's kind of just not quite sure what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move on to rugby because big tournament in Europe, the Six Nations tournament, and Mother Nature interfered with that last weekend, didn't she?
Yeah, we've had just crazy weather in, it is kind of all of Europe. It's not just England. It's just been storms, rain, and a lot of sporting events have been cancelled. It's not, sometimes in situations like these, it's the women's sport that gets disproportionately affected by bad weather. But it's actually been a men's Six Nations game was also cancelled, and a men's Premier League game, so that's football, top level football in the country, was also cancelled. So I think that just shows the level of kind of importance that they put on this bad weather. They were cancelling just basically everything. So there are a few women's Six Nations games that did get cancelled. I think there was there's been a bit of, I think as women's sport is being covered more and getting more publicity and awareness, at the same time when there's something that's they're not being treated as well, I think that gets more coverage as well. So I think in the past there's probably been incidents like this all the time, but because there's been more attention put on women's sports, these are coming to light a lot more. Because I think it was the Wales Ireland games, they were playing in this storm. It was the day after, so it wasn't quite as bad, but it was still like horrendous rain, cold, wind. And then one of the Welsh players after the game revealed that they hadn't actually had hot water in their changing room, so they couldn't have a hot shower after the game. And this kind of just caused a lot of criticism, I think. That would never, ever happen in a men's top level game of rugby. It just would be out of the question. So I think a lot of people were angry about this. And then also people a few days previously were quite angry when it was kind of revealed that they weren't actually getting any prize money for this tournament. So the men get something like, I think it's like £16 million prize money across the tournament, and for the women it's £0. So like I was saying, this is kind of one of the first years that women's Six Nations have been really kind of covered and been given, like spaces in newspapers and on the TV schedule. But at the same time, people are starting to realise, they've got no prize money. They're still playing games where they don't have a hot shower afterwards. So it's kind of starting to expose this inequality really in rugby at the moment.
Well, I didn't realise they didn't get any money at all compared to the millions that the men get. So that's atrocious. So I did hear the story about the hot water, deficiency there. I mean, that's just horrendous. I mean, we hear so much about poor locker room, changing room facilities, don't we, in the women's game across different sports, that they are often inferior to the men's, but to not have any hot water, especially after a game like that in those conditions, that's appalling.
Yeah, and I think I don't think it would be more acceptable, but I think people maybe would expect it more in the domestic league. But the Six Nations is one of the most prestigious rugby tournaments in Europe. So you're playing, anyone competing in it is playing top level rugby. And I think that's why everyone was so surprised at the lack of, just hot water. It's so basic.
Yeah, that's just awful. But as you say, on the plus side, they are getting more exposure. So hopefully people, who need to pay attention will pay attention to this, and it will put pressure on the organisations and the authorities to do something about that. Number one, basic facilities, but also about the discrepancy in the prize funds. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's like 0 to 16 million, whatever it is. What did you say it was? 16 million?
It was, I think they get something like 16 million. And they don't. The women's tournament doesn't have a title sponsor either. So the men's has Guinness, the alcoholic drink, and they do put some money into the women's, but they don't disclose how much money they put in. And they're not a title sponsor. So I presume that's when you get a title sponsor, it's a big company. That's where you get the money and the prize money and so on. But they haven't managed to get one yet. Which is, I mean, if I owned a company, I'd want. Even if it was just for good publicity, I'd be, all over like a women's tournament that's kind of on the up. So hopefully in a few years we'll be able to, that someone will come in and give them the money they deserve.
So down to the actual playing form that you've seen so far, who's your favourite to take the tournament this year?
I think England or Ireland, both are currently top of the table. I think England probably, just because when you in tournaments like these, it is kind of who has the best domestic competition. It's very similar to, I suppose, women's football as well. You know, you've got such a built-up system in America, and that is one of the main reasons they're just like good at everything. So for me, I think it is going to be England, just because they've got some degree of kind of professionality in the domestic league. I think England and then Ireland will probably be their main opponents.
Yeah, and England have the depth too, don't they?
Yeah, I think that's, I think when you look at teams like Wales and Scotland who are kind of really struggling, it is probably because, like I said, they don't have as much infrastructure, and because of that, they don't have as many players to call upon. Well, like you said, England have, they've got a really, really good squad. So even if they are, in one of these horrendous games and awful weather, and, they can call on people to come on who are still really good quality as well.
All right, well, we'll watch that unfold over there in England and see if England can do the business. And meanwhile, over there in England, a lovely story about Shauna Coxsey, who's become the first British sports climber to be named for the Tokyo team. I love this story because climbing is becoming more popular, and I think it might get quite a bit of attention in Tokyo, mightn't it?
Yeah, I mean, climbing is really, really popular over here. A lot of my friends at uni climb just for fun. It's not, it's not something that is like where you play for a team and you have to go every week to training and then play matches. Like, people would just go to the climbing lab, which was in the city we were in, and just do it for fun, like 2 or 3 times a week if they wanted to. I don't know if it's translated. People don't watch it on TV, but I suppose that because it isn't aired on TV. So I'm really, really interested to see how it translates into an Olympic sport that's being shown on TV. Because people do it as a hobby, but whether people watch it, I don't know. And I think another thing about it is that there's 3 disciplines, and I think it's bouldering is quite confusing. There's one discipline that's a bit, you have to get your head around it a bit. So hopefully people will watch it on TV and stick with it. But Shauna Coxsey's been named on the team, which I think she's already been around in climbing for ages. She's a 2-time World Cup winner, and she's a 2-time bronze medalist at the World Championships as well. So she's very established in climbing, but I think because it's now become an Olympic sport, you get like a completely different level of recognition that you normally get if you're just in a sport that's not in the Olympics. So that news has got a lot of good coverage. I've seen quite a few interviews with her. It's really exciting, and hopefully people get behind climbing at the Olympics as well.
Yeah, and that, for those of you who want to schedule that on your diary, that takes place from August 4th to the 7th there in Tokyo. And as you mentioned, there's those 3 disciplines, which I didn't know about. Not that I know much about climbing. It just makes me nervous watching it because I don't have a head for heights. And it does, as you say, does seem to be popular as a hobby. It's kind of, almost like an urban sport, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And something that's different about the Tokyo competition is it's going to be really testing for the athletes, because in normal climbing competitions, you compete in just one discipline or 2 separately. So you can be really, really good at bouldering, and you could win that, and you wouldn't have to bother with speed or lead, which are the other 2. But at the Olympics, all athletes are going to have to compete in all 3 disciplines, and then the winner is going to be determined from that. So they've never really had to do that before. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they adapt to that, and who actually comes out on top. So say Coxsey might be good at a certain discipline. I think it's bouldering is her speciality, but so she might do really well on that, and then when she goes into speed, she might really struggle and then lose an Olympic medal because of that. So yeah, we'll just have to see.
Yeah. All right. We'll be following that alongside everything else that's happening in Tokyo, which you will be going to. So you need to start getting in shape here, Nancy, for that endurance event of the year, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a long one, but good, obviously.
Actually, I did that when I was covering the Atlanta Games, because I knew it was going to be very hot and very humid. So I did my training on Primrose Hill in London and really actually went for it. And it did make a big difference. You know, I was up and down that hill early in the morning.
Yeah, I know that hill, and that hill is, I wouldn't want to run up that.
Yeah, and I was going up it backwards and which way. And I was going up and down. And it really did help me when I got to Atlanta. The humidity was really bad, as we expect. Now I live over here. I kind of get used to it. You get acclimated, of course. But I remember the only day off we had during the Atlanta Olympics, about midway through the competition, and some of us decided that we would go and tackle Stone Mountain. And because I had put some work into this, I got up to the top while many of them were at the halfway point. And it was simply because I, put in the legwork at Primrose Hill. So,
yeah, maybe I need to go down and do that.
All right, all good fun. Well, we'll follow that story and more here on the WiSP Sports Desk. And don't forget, you can find the show notes to this episode always, and the links to the stories that we cover here at wisports.com. Just go to the Listen tab and drop down to the WiSP Sports Desk. All right, well, we're going to move on to a story on gender equality, too. This has come out of Lithuania, the National Olympic Committee over in Lithuania. Now, what's that initiative about, Nancy?
It's quite interesting because it's working towards a gender balance within the media in Lithuania. So it is focusing as well in federations and sports. But I think they did a review and found that the Lithuanian media is quite askew with kind of like stereotypes, and it's not got a very good gender balance. It just showed that it portrayed female athletes based on their appearance rather than their achievements. And there was kind of less information given about female athletes rather than male athletes. And also just a general lack of female journalists, I think, in reporting on sport in Lithuania. So they've kind of just had this review, and they had this event with journalists and PR people, and they also had athletes as well. And they just working towards changing that, which I think is really interesting, because you do have kind of people going about it in the maybe a more conventional way of trying to get more women involved in actually playing sport or governance. But I do think sometimes the lack of women in media and the way the media represents female athletes is something that's maybe sometimes overlooked. So it would be interesting to see kind of how much of an impact these kind of reviews and events have on changing that.
Yeah, that's a very good initiative. Good for them, because we often think about the athletes, don't we, and administration as well, and women in sports governance, but we sometimes don't consider that. And of course, being in the media, we do, but I think the wider public doesn't think about media as much, because I don't think they're as discerning, because I don't know where I'm going with this. I think it's probably not so in the public's conscience as it is if you're in the media and wish to, get the kind of representation that we feel we should have, and there be more women, because it's been traditionally such a male-dominated profession.
Yeah, and I think when people, if they're watching the news or if they're reading a paper, they get things as a finished product. So they don't really care who's worked on it or who's found the story and so on. But it is important, I think, having women's voices, because then just women are more represented at every level. So it is really important. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, talking about investing in women, there's a few football stories, soccer stories, as we normally do have here on the sports desk. But this one I wanted to lead with, because the FIFA President has committed to invest more in women's sports. Did you read that story, Nancy?
Yeah, I did. I had a read over. I thought it was. What he said was I think is really good. I'm sometimes quite skeptical of FIFA and Infantino, the FIFA president. I think sometimes he thinks more about money than actually what's good for the game, both men and women. I think he really focuses on money a lot rather than development. But I think, I don't know, there's almost a tone of apology in what he said. He almost seemed to, kind of say, we haven't really capitalised enough on the Women's World Cup last summer, and we're just going to do more. So, I mean, actions speak louder than words. So I'd like to see him actually do more. But it was quite nice, I think, to hear him kind of be a bit apologetic about it.
He says all the right words, like gender equality on the pitch or outside the pitch, in the rooms, in the meeting rooms, in the councils, in the management. He said we need to be talking about gender equality. And then, interestingly, the French president proposed looking at a World Cup final every 2 years, because obviously it benefited France last year, and they got a lot out of it, I would think, tourist-wise, and sellout crowds. So they probably would be the first nation to be in favor of it. But I wonder how popular that idea would be of a biannual World Cup final.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it. I don't think this is the first time he's mentioned it, and people, I don't think, reacted that positively to it. Because for me, I do think for FIFA, it would be more of a money move than an actual. I don't think it would necessarily focus on the development of women's football. I don't really see how having a tournament every 2 years would develop women's football, especially when you do have the World Cup and then you've got the Olympic tournament, which for women is actually really, really important. It's different to the men's teams who play their under 23 teams and use it as a, youth development. Like, for women's football is actually really important. And then you've got continental games. So here in England, there's the Euros, which we're hosting in 2021, so next summer, which is just really important for us, that we're going to host a tournament and hopefully make women's football even more popular here. So I just don't really see where you'd even get the room to put a World Cup every 2 years without kind of stepping on toes of competitions that are already in place and doing quite good things already.
Yeah, it's a good point. It is whether we could fit it into the schedule internationally. But talking about the Olympics, qualifications for the Olympics, that played out over here with the CONCACAF regional championships that took place. And as everybody will know, if they follow soccer at all, the US did dominate that. They won the CONCACAF Cup again, and they also dominated the tournament without conceding a goal. They scored 25 in the tournament. That's pretty impressive by any standards. And that last game against Canada in the final was a little bit more of a tussle. Canada were really working well in the defense, I thought, in the first half. So it went to halftime 0-0. And then obviously the US decided how they had to play this game. And they cracked through the defense to score 3 goals in the second half. I don't know if you saw any of that, Nancy, but it's pretty dominating, isn't it? I mean, that's got to give them a lot of confidence. And certainly the new coach, I mean, he must be very happy.
Yeah, I think especially going into the Olympic year, is it US have got 4 Olympic golds? I think they're looking for their 5th Olympic gold medal, which is just shows their dominance in itself. But it also shows that the US have, they're not slowing down in any respect. Every year they keep coming back with a really good team, and they've, not conceding a goal is just really, really impressive.
And what I enjoyed was Vlatko's response to every goal that we scored. That guy was up in the air, and he was, clearly ecstatic, obviously, because he's got a ticket to Tokyo and, an unbeatable record so far. No, the season's young, but nonetheless, it's a pretty good start for him as the coach. So, good for him. And that was really exciting to watch. I have to say, I being a supporter, you kind of, you hope that they will go unbeaten and you hope that they will win. But I thought at the halftime, I thought, oh gosh, this could just end up in a draw, if Canada keep playing like this. But I think this speaks to gain the depth, because they brought Megan on the 60-something minute and she scored. So they did make a few changes, but they didn't play Tobin Heath and didn't play Carly Lloyd. And, there's some players they didn't need to. That's just amazing depth that they have. So, kudos to them. On we go to the She Believe Cup, which I believe that little old team England need to come over and defend their titles next month, isn't it, March?
Yeah, next month. And we were saying that England are actually the defending champions. So we won last year, which is quite a nice feeling. But yeah, it was a big result for England last year because we had the World Cup up ahead, and I think it just showed that we could compete among the best. But we did have a relatively disappointing World Cup, and I know Phil Neville, England's manager, is not under criticism because I think that would be a bit unfair. But a lot of people aren't too certain about him. They're not too convinced about his ability to manage the team. So I think if this tournament doesn't go as well, there'll be massive kind of doubts maybe going into the Olympic tournament. I'd say that maybe a positive of this year is that France aren't in it, and France are normally quite a bogey team for England. So Spain are in it, and no offence to Spain whatsoever because they are a good team, but I think maybe potentially slightly easier than France. And then Japan, of course, we seem to meet in every tournament, and then of course the US. And I think if England beat the US, hopefully that would be a good sign for things to come. But obviously that's easier said than done.
Yeah, if's a very big word, isn't it?
Yeah. Very good, yeah.
All right. Well, final story on football this week is from BBC, who have put out their shortlist for the Footballer of the Year 2020. It seems odd that they would be naming the Footballer of the Year for 2020 already, but they have 5 candidates that have been nominated and are in the shortlist. So those are Julie Bronze, of course, England and Lion, Julie Ertz, USA, and also is the captain of the Chicago Red Stars. And then I'm just trying to find a word to describe Sam Kerr. She's just amazing. Australia, and of course she recently signed for Chelsea. And then we've got the Dutch player Viviane Miedema, and she also plays for your team, Arsenal. And then finally, Megan Rapinoe, who plays for Reign FC, and of course is the indomitable US soccer player, won the Ballon d'Or last year. I don't know what she didn't win, but I have voted, and you can vote too. So I'll put a link on the show notes for that, so you can vote for the BBC Football of the Year. Have you voted?
Yeah, I voted. I think it'd be quite easy to guess who I voted for.
Yeah, it's really, really easy to guess, and it's probably pretty easy for you to guess who I voted for.
Yeah, I'm going to say Rapinoe.
Yeah.
Maybe Julie Ertz, though. I think Julie Ertz, I think a lot of people are saying it was a bit unexpected, but completely deserved.
Yeah, I would agree with that. She came on to captain the team in the final, the CONCACAF final on Sunday evening, and that was the first time she captained the national squad. So that was nice for her. She captains the Red Stars, so she has that experience, but he brought her on as captain. I thought it was a nice touch.
Yeah, no, I was reading out the blurb for each player on BBC Sport. And I was really surprised that she was named US Soccer Female Player of the Year for the second time, I think last year. Which it didn't surprise me because I think she's bad, but just because the American team is so full of stars.
Quite.
If she's voted Player of the Year, that's massive, I think, in such a strong team of players.
Yeah, it is, as you say, there's tremendous strength there. She's a midfielder. And she's got some competition there in the midfield, just alone in the midfield for that kind of honour. So good for her. Very experienced. She's got over 80, it says 88 caps on her bio there on the BBC website. So that I don't know how recent that is, but yeah, she's a seasoned player. Good for her. We'll see who wins that. We'll announce it here on the WiSP Sports Desk when they announce it. Well, Nancy, I think that's about a wrap for this week. What are you covering before we see you this time next week?
Just everything really in sport. We're really kind of focusing on the impact coronavirus is having on the sporting world. So, yeah, keeping an eye on that, and then just literally everything else that's happening as well.
Yeah, as you do on InsideTheGames.biz, you'll find a link there to Nancy's blog, InsideTheGames.biz, where you can keep up with what she's writing about, and also follow her on social media. And that's Nancy_Gillen, correct?
Yep, that's right.
All right, that's on Twitter. And we, of course, are at WiSP Sports. You can follow us on any social media channel. And you can also find us more online on the website, much more about women's sports generally on the website wisports.com. And if you do want to drop us a line, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any suggestions for stories that we should be covering here on the WiSP Sports Desk, you can reach us via email at info@wisports.com. And Nancy and I will be back same time, same place next week for more coverage from around the world of women's sports. Thanks, Nancy. See you next time.
Thank you.